Hello, everybody, and welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League and other football topics. James, thought
How
I'd
are you
add that
feeling,
in
Suj? Can we
today.
start with that first? Because a lot of
Oh
people
yeah,
want to
thank you to
know.
everybody that has messaged me. Yeah, feel all right. I think, relatively speaking, I'm fine compared to how ill some people have been with this thing. I know people that have been in hospital on oxygen and all the rest of that kind of stuff. So I'm still at home and I can feel it. I definitely know the way I describe it is I definitely know I'm ill and I definitely know that I have this virus. But it's not completely debilitating. It's just that it's like just there. The cough is just there. The tightness in the chest is just there. Sore throat is just there. Body aches just a bit there. Feeling a bit weak, but nothing bad enough that it's like I need to go to hospital or I'm absolutely wiped out. Like I've had flu worse than this. I've been more ill through just regular flu than this. But you definitely know that you have this if you have it and you get symptoms.
I know that you ain't feeling well because you told me how long you spent in bed, which is the equivalent.
Yeah.
Is the equivalent of how I think most people think the sort of hours you sleep in a week, mate.
Possibly. My missus reckons I'm just doing this to get out of homeschooling, mate. She's like, you're just trying to blag and not be near the kids for 7 days or 10 days. Like,
Is she right?
No. although if you put it out there to a lot of people, would you rather have mild COVID or homeschool? I think a lot of people would pick mild COVID, no doubt. We should put that in a people's poll one of these days, which is a segue into the people's poll, which is what we have today.
Listen, you definitely want the homeschooling first, please, guys. People's poll today. Yeah, very close vote this week. It was neck and neck for hours, and then one just pulled away right at the end. So there were three options. One was Mesut Ozil. Let's say his Arsenal legacy or lack of. Looks like he's going to Fenerbahce. You see Mikel Arteta when he was asked about him after the game last night.
No, I
you didn't. You were in bed, weren't you?
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
So Arteta was asked about Ozil, and he like in terms of like what have you got to say about him leaving and stuff. And Arteta just said, "Yeah, when it's official, we'll make an announcement."
Oh, really?
Deadpanned it.
So dead. Why has it ended up so badly? Because Ozil doesn't come across like he's being a twat about it.
Some of the social media stuff, he's been stitching Arsenal up, hasn't he, to make them look bad on social media, and that would have been quite a big thread of what we'd have talked about and stuff. So yeah, listen, better for everybody that it's done and is finished. In terms of legacy, I'll answer it very, very short. For all Arsenal fans, they're never going to put Mesut Ozil on the same platform as someone like Dennis Bergkamp, for example. Was obviously a success for a few years, but he's the way it's fallen, it's just not going to be remembered that great.
No, I don't think it will. You're right. Yeah.
Another option was PL and COVID, players' responsibilities. Lots of messages last week about don't go celebrating. And yet, other than Leicester, I saw everybody cuddling and celebrating.
Yeah.
And it was scoring goals. It was like no different. Other than even Sam Allardyce, it was like the camera was on him after the game at Wolves. And all the players were high-fiving and hugging, which obviously was a massive result for him. You can completely understand the emotion in it, being a derby as well. And he's shouting, no hugging, no kissing.
Yeah.
It just felt so staged for the camera and stuff. The only thing I'd say on that, without doing a whole pod on it, is if they're all turning up to games and they're all negative, what does it matter? That would be my number one question.
It's like if you're testing negative, you've got the all clear. That's the whole point of getting tested. So.
In terms of the hugging, celebrating, there was a scene last night when I think Arsenal had a corner in the Arsenal-Newcastle game, and there were about 15 players inside the 6-yard box, and they're standing there wrestling each other for 5-10 seconds in the build-up for it. Right, I know which one's worse. It's at the corner. Yeah. So what are you going to do? Stop people marking each other at corners. There was another one in the Wolves-Everton game last week where, do you remember England at the World Cup where they had like the love train?
The train. Yeah.
And there was one, and I think it was, so then Wolves set up their own train to mark Everton's, and they were obviously going to split and then go man to man. And I think it was like Saiz and Michael Keane, and they're about half a feet away from each other, just looking at each other, ready to go for about 10 seconds. Again, which one is worse? But obviously the Premier League trying to step up, obviously, what they're doing behind the scenes and stuff. Yeah, look, players need to be sensible, but in the heat of the moment, you lose the emotion. Anyway, That didn't win the vote. The winner of the vote, and we have to thank one of our patrons, Ruben Leisberg, who suggested this topic and also suggested the topic for last week's winning topic, which was how Brexit will have an impact on transfers in the Premier League. Today, we're going to be talking about the impact of agents in football. It's like a dirty word, isn't it? As soon as you say
It's
it.
such a controversial subject. And the truth of it is, I think that so many of us have opinions on agents within football without actually even understanding or knowing what the role of agents is, and why we need them, and what they actually even do for certain players. But you hear some of the fees that they pick up on transfers of players, and you're like, what are you actually even doing for your money? Um, some of these are in excess of million. Well, if you look at it, the Premier League in the season 2019-2020 spent 200, just over 260 million pounds on agents. Would that, for people like you and me, when I look at that number, I see that as coming out of grassroots football, or just coming out of the game and going into something that's a lot of money to take out of football and put into agents' pockets. Agents get bandied about as greedy. Quite often, they don't help themselves with the type of things they say, but you see transfers and what agents are doing to instigate transfers. What's Pogba's guy, right?
Raiola, Mino Raiola.
Mino Raiola. He's always causing trouble here or there, and so on and so on. So yeah, I think it's very interesting that we do have a negative connotation on agents, but I reckon if you ask the majority of people, what does an agent do? They probably don't even know.
No, that's fair. We'll look at some of the roles of what they do. Just interestingly, on that number that you mentioned there, in terms of that was agent spending in the 2019-20 season from Premier League clubs. There's a disparity in that even within the Premier League. So the team that spent the most on agent fees last season was Liverpool. Spent £30.3 million on agent fees. Listen, that money could have gone towards a centre half. I'm just saying. Burnley 3.9 million on agents. Now that's
Yeah.
massive, right? That's a
Yeah.
huge difference within the same league.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, quite often, the fee that a club pays is a percentage of the transfer fee. So if you're buying more expensive players, you're inevitably going to be paying
Right.
bigger fees.
Yeah. There's also a little bit of I think most people think, having done a bit of research on this, I think people just think that agent owns player X, owns the wrong word. Okay, representative.
Yeah,
And
they have a contract to represent them for whatever
let's
period. Yeah.
say the player earns £100,000 a week, and the agent gets, I don't know, 5 or 10% commission depending on circumstance of that wage, and the player pays the agent. I think what happens here a lot is the club directly pays the agent on behalf of the player. So I think in most cases, if you looked at money paid from players to agents, and that would be a really interesting number to find out if we could, you'd probably find it's close to zero. So
Yeah,
I
it wouldn't
don't
surprise me
think
if it
it's a
is.
case that the clubs are paying all this money and there's another, I don't know, 10 million from players on top. I think a lot of the player contribution is just paid directly from the club rather than the player.
Yeah, it's a funny one because if you look at it, you're like, well, the agent works for the player, therefore the player should pay the agent. But when you dig down into the detail of it, it is a bit of a controversial one as to who should pay the agent, because there are certain situations where Club X, Tottenham, want to buy a player. If they want to buy that player, they will approach his agent and say, look, I want to buy, who do you want to buy right now, James? Bernardo Silva. I know you like him. They'll approach Bernardo Silva's agent. Now, there could be other clubs that want to buy Bernardo Silva. Real Madrid might be in, XYZ might be in, and so on. The agent now is in a position where he could be giving help to Spurs to get Bernardo Silva. He could turn around and say, well, Real Madrid are offering him 100 grand a week, but no goal bonus or appearance bonus. If you can offer him 100 grand a week and do this, that, and the other, I'll get Bernardo Silva to sign for you. In that instance, he is looking out for the best interest of his player, but he is also helping Spurs. So in that situation, why should Spurs not pay him a fee as well? But I think the Premier League were looking at a situation where, is it right that both the player and the club pay the agent on a transfer? It seems a little bit having your cake and eating it by getting and picking up money on both sides of the equation when you talk about who pays the agent's fees.
You couldn't have picked a better example than Bernardo Silva, because you know who his agent is, right?
No.
It's George Mendes. George Mendes is
Okay.
one of the super agents at the moment, and obviously has a
He
huge
needs
portfolio of Portuguese players. And
he needs his own podcast, mate.
who's
This is that guy.
who's Mendes's top guy
I know.
with clients?
Jose Mourinho.
Jose Mourinho.
We talked. I mean, some regular listeners. I'm not sure if we talked about this on a Patreon poll, but the restaurant up in Cockfosters, mate, near where James and I live in North London, Middies, where Sacramento and Mourinho go. Do you remember I was telling you about the manager that wants to be an agent and is ready and waiting for Jose
Yes.
Mourinho? Funny story, but
I can't afford to
Mendes
eat in
is-
Cockfosters, by the way.
Don't worry, it's fine. Mendes is an interesting character all on his own, but yeah, this is the issue, right? So there was a debate. I saw an interesting thing with Craig Bellamy where he was talking about it, and he said, "Look, you can turn around and say, why should the club pay the agent's fees? But think about it this way, right? So if you're a player and you get £10 million a year in salary, what is that? That's 200 grand a week. So you're a top player here, 200 grand a week. And the club is going to pay the agent a £2 million fee or whatever. If the Premier League or the FA or UEFA or whoever, FIFA say, right, clubs don't pay agents' fees, players pay agents' fees. They're just going to say you're bumping up my salary to cover what I've got to pay my agent. It's not like they're gonna just take it lightly and say, don't worry, yeah, I'll take a cut in my wages. They won't. They'll want more money. And what happens in that situation is that not only are you paying the agent's fees on top to the player, but whatever tax is involved as well. All these guys are on 50% tax, right? So you're now like, well, if I have to pay my agent £2 million, you've got to pay me an extra £4 million because 2 million I've got to give to the tax man and 2 million to my agent. It would end up sucking more money out of the football club than the way the system is right now, which is the clubs paying the agents' fees, which is why I don't think they've rocked the boat with it necessarily. But it does raise a question around where's the burden of responsibility and who are they acting for?
I think agents are a strong reason for why value of player has gone through the roof. Now, obviously, over the last 10, 20, 30 years, however long you want to manage it over, obviously inflation is going to say that players' transfers is going to go up in cost. That's happened going back to black and white TV and stuff. But I think agent fees have pushed this through. I mean, we're talking about Mino Raiola. I mean, the Paul Pogba deal took a really long time to happen. And a lot of that was to do with, I think, the delay in transfer fee for the agent and stuff. And that happens so much in big money transfers now. I mean, if you say, let's say we knew that Messi was going to go to Manchester City, that's not a transfer that's going to get completed in 10 hours. Be lucky if it gets, even if everybody knows Barcelona are happy, City are happy, Messi are happy, that deal is probably still going to take a couple of weeks to conclude. And that's part of it. How much are you going to pay the agent? Who's paying the agent? Are Barcelona going to end up paying some money to the agent for the amount of loyalty that Messi's given? I mean, there's loads of spin-offs to this in terms of people claiming their rights for loyalty, the negotiation of the transfer. I mean, to be honest with you, in the case of something like that, Lionel Messi would have every right to turn up at Manchester City and pretty much ask for whatever he wanted, and Manchester City will probably pay it. Do we need an agent involved? I think that's one of the big questions. Why do we need an agent for a deal like this? When Messi could put City up to rights and go, I want 100 grand every time I score. I want 50 grand every time I get an assist, whatever. Right? Another 100 grand every time I play, whatever. I want a certain amount of my commercial money. But then what we don't know is if Lionel Messi is an intelligent man or not. Maybe he doesn't know to turn up and ask for these sort of things. And that's where an agent really does come involved.
Yeah, I mean, they know more about how other people's deals are being structured to make sure that the player's getting the best possible deal, like goal bonuses, assist bonuses, commercial rights, all the rest of that kind of stuff. An 18, 19, 20-year-old young up-and-coming player is not going to know about even the opportunity to potentially get these kind of deals. So I can understand agents will get the best deal for their player. Doesn't always mean that the player is worth it. I mean, we've seen so many players get great deals. I'm looking forward to our Patreon podcast later, Tottenham, because I want to talk a little bit about transfers there. But the amount of times we've got players based on recommendations and contracts that have been given out that are just not good enough. You ask an interesting question there, though. Why do we need them? I mean, ultimately, all the players are members of a union, which is the PFA. And the PFA will represent the players in contract negotiations. It's that is part of what they do. There are a lot of players in the Premier League, I say a lot, it's not the majority by any stretch, who don't have an agent necessarily and will just let the PFA negotiate their contract for them. So, yeah, you're right. We don't need agents, and players don't need agents. The PFA actually has the ability to do that job for them.
But then in the starting instance, if let's just say it was a bad example, but if City were to buy Messi, for example, then at the start of the negotiation, Messi's got nothing to do with the PFA.
No, but
So
someone in the
someone's
UK
got to
at the
start
moment
that.
does. Yeah,
What represent Messi?
yeah. I mean, he could go to the PFA and be like, "Look, looking to come and join Manchester City. I need representation." I'm sure the players have to pay a fee to be part of the
But
PFA,
what if,
an
again, to go
annual.
backwards, what if Messi doesn't know that he can do that?
Yeah. Of course. And the thing is, right? These guys get signed up, so we're kind of moving from question A to question B to question C. Like, firstly, who pays the agents? What B? Why do we even need them? Thirdly, yeah, do they even know about these deals? The thing is, like, we're talking about 18, 19, 20. Messi's obviously 31, 32, whatever. These guys are getting signed up at 14, 15, 13 and stuff. You hear stories of coaches and ex-players talking about how agents come to training grounds and they're buying 12 and 13-year-old kids new boots and this and that. And it's a numbers game. They sign up as many as they can at that age, and the ones that drop out, and so on, and off you go. So it's not even at 17, 18, 19. It's like 13, 14, 15.
It's kind of hard if you bring in sort of an example. So George Mendes is one of the super agents who we've already mentioned. There's more to mention on him. He heads up a company called Gestifute. And what that company has done over a quite a sustained period now, and how it helps Mendes become so big, is they get these Portuguese signed up, players signed up really young. So if you see a young Portuguese player coming over here, there's a good chance that Mendes is his agent, right? We know about Mendes' links to Wolves. It's quite well documented. And when Doherty went to Tottenham for 15 million, one of the main questions at the time was, how have they
How
managed
much
to make...
is Mendes getting paid?
well, yeah, and how has that happened? And it's like, what
Yeah.
are Wolves getting back in return? Now, I don't know if, for example, Fabio Silva was part of that, perhaps Vitinha. I know Vitinha is definitely a client of Mendes who went there on loan. You start, well, how did that happen? I mean, in hindsight, I know why Tottenham got him for 15 million, because he's rubbish. But at the time, it was like, well, something feels weird about this. And the conclusion we all came to at the time was, this has got Mendes all over it somewhere because of his relationship with Mourinho.
Yep.
I'll get you this player if that's the player you want, and in return, I'll give something back to Wolves. Do you know the first transfer that George Mendes ever conducted was? I'm going to guess that you don't.
No.
But the first
I was gonna.
transfer that he
Yeah.
was ever a part of was transferring clubs for Nuno Espirito Santo between two
Okay.
clubs in Portugal. And obviously,
Oh,
Nuno is now Wolves manager. They obviously
yes.
have a great relationship, etc., etc. I think we need to... There's things like that in the background that always make you question the morality of this. That Doherty move raised so many suspicions and questions that it just didn't feel right. As I said, in hindsight, we're looking at it going, well, it's a good deal for Wolves, and Tottenham didn't pay that much, and it doesn't really matter. The guy's not even playing in the first team at the moment. But there are moves like that cause questions. That caused questions in even our Twitter community at the time. Why is this transfer happening? It doesn't make much sense. And it just feels like Mendes had his paws all over it to benefit Mourinho, to perhaps benefit Wolves, definitely to benefit himself.
Sure.
And Doherty
I'm sure it's done right.
he is a client of Mendes, by the way. Doherty.
Yeah. So yeah, at the same time, I think it's worth also pointing out that agents do good work. Um, if you were a young 18, 19-year old now and you had the choice of signing with an independent agent or signing with a super agent, a Mendez or whoever else is out there, you're going to take the bigger agent. I mean, they'll already have links with a lot of the major sports brands and commercial opportunities and sponsorship. And to play devil's advocate, at the end of the day, a football player's career is maybe 15 years if they have a decent one. They don't play forever, and you'd like to think that the agent's responsibility is two things: one, to make sure they maximize their career and earn earn as much as they can, play at the highest level that they possibly can, and also look after them once football is done. That happens, and that seems to happen less so. That the agents stick around once playing careers are done. An interesting example is Mika Richards, for example. I don't think he has an agent now. He manages his own stuff or something. I think there was that controversy back end of last year where he just said he was going to donate some money to charity or something and got called out for it. And it was partly because he represents himself. He doesn't have anyone telling him what to do, what not to do, and that kind of thing. Although his email address is at a production company, so I'm not 100% sure on that. But the agent's job is to help the players maximize it. Now, clubs sign up tons of kids and they'll discard them as quickly as they can if they're not going to make it and they don't think that. So why do we give a shit about the clubs? Like, you know what? If you're going to turn your youth academies into factories and play a numbers game with that, and on the flip side, the players are there to take advantage of you at the end of the day. So if you're going to treat players in that way, then there's no reason why players should not also try and make the most they can out, out of clubs.
You're very right to say that obviously there is good work that agents do. So, I mean, I made a list of things to say, like, what are their responsibilities in terms of looking after a player? So, one, I think, is career management. And you get different roles in this because, look, there are good agents, there are bad agents, and like there are good players and bad players and good clubs and bad clubs. Transfer negotiation. So there's a long held belief that obviously for a lot of people, a lot of agents rather, that a player moving clubs is necessarily is a good thing for an agent because he's likely to get fees, etc. But there are a lot of agents out there who just want the best for their player. I mean, Jonathan Barnett, who's Gareth Bale's agent, for example, he's actually a gooner. I actually really appreciate his comments in the summer once everyone knew Bale was coming back with saying, look, I don't want him to go to Tottenham because I'm an Arsenal fan. But sure. I want what's best for my client, and the best thing for Gareth at the moment is to go and play somewhere where he's appreciated. Not that he's playing; that's a different podcast.
Yeah.
But he's made a lot of money off of Gareth Bale, and Gareth Bale's basically moved once in his career.
Yeah, I mean, remember agents pick up a fee on renewals as well, contract renegotiations and stuff like that. So they do get involved with renewals. So they do pick
Jonathan Barnett wasn't harmed by the fact that Gareth Bale stayed at Real Madrid for as long as he did, and wasn't harmed by the fact he stayed at Tottenham in the first instance for as long as he did either. Because you're quite right. There's the spin-offs of the commercial stuff, the sponsorship, etc. Bale was on obviously a huge wage still, with the majority of that still being paid by Real Madrid. So Barnett, by doing not too much, has become someone who's made a lot of money. I had to laugh when you're looking at super agents like George Mendes, Mino Raiola, Jonathan Barnett. I saw one that was like, Mendes has got these two world-class players, Cristiano Ronaldo and someone else. Raiola's got Pogba and someone else. And Jonathan Barnett's main two was Gareth Bale and Jesse Lingard. But he still made an absolute fortune, Jonathan Barnett. Contract negotiations, obviously Barnett would fall into that sort of sphere, if you want. Can't think of the right word. Financial planning. There's a lot of stuff off the field that we don't think, because we just think with our football heads, about like house buying, stuff like that. Do agents get
we all
involved
live in a Robbie Fowler house, don't we? So
I wouldn't know what a Robbie Fowler house like. I wouldn't even know what a restaurant's like in Cockfosters, mate. Sponsorship and marketing opportunities. Yeah. So in terms of all the top players now will have an agreement with a Nike or an Adidas or someone similar. Agent will generally start that kind of conversation. Public relations. I mean, did the agents help with training of social media, for example? I'm guessing Edison Cavani's agent probably didn't quite have that word when he signed for Manchester United.
Yeah,
dealing with disciplinary issues. So
of
let's
course.
say a player gets called for suspension because something happens. It's Edison Cavani. Something happens off the field, for example. What's the role of the agent in helping to kind of protect his player? Is it just the club under that circumstance, or does that, you would think the agent would have some sort of strong involvement in
Yeah, I mean,
protecting his client as well?
thing to remember is agents are not lawyers. So every agent will also have a law firm or what have you working alongside them. The other thing is agents, quite often you hear of players that have an agent and a management company, and some of the commercial relationships are managed by the management company, but the agent handles more personal kind of situations and business and affairs and all that kind of stuff.
I think for a lot of players, what they value most in an agent is the off-field stuff.
Mm.
The looking after stuff in terms of finances that
So when you say off
we don't
field, let's
think
say
about.
non-football stuff.
Non-football, yeah.
Yeah, because even contract negotiations and stuff you'd consider off field, but it's football, so non-football related stuff.
Most players, if they're going into a sponsorship deal with, I don't know, a big name sports brand or something, don't want the hassle of going through that negotiation. I don't think it's just, okay, get it done for me. Those are the boots. That's the kit I've got to wear, that kind of thing. Whereas I think when it comes to the football field, a player then probably has more of a say in terms of, look, I don't want to play for that football club, or I want to go and play in that country, for example. Whereas, I mean, does a footballer really give a shit in terms of where they wear Nike gear or Adidas gear? It's probably going to be whoever pays the most, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's where I think agents become really useful for players, is perhaps less football stuff. And obviously, yes, in terms of contract negotiation, all the stuff that they might not think about. But I just feel like the common football fan even knows these days that players will get goal bonus, appearance bonus. Some are even genuinely getting assist bonus now, for example, depending on the type of player. Clean sheet bonus for goalkeepers, defenders. I feel like all these things are quite common knowledge, but maybe they're not. And I guess what a player might not know is where to bracket himself. Does he go and say, like, I want an extra $5,000 for a clean sheet if he's a goalkeeper, when actually what his worth is compared to, say, I don't know, let's say Lloris and Leno as a comparison. If Leno had gone to Arsenal and said, I want $5,000 for a clean sheet, but found out that Lloris was getting $20,000 for a clean sheet at Tottenham, his agent might know that. You go, well, that's the worth actually at a similar size club of what your clean sheet should be. That's where probably an agent's going to come in useful, whereas the player's just going to get powered down. Or I think quite often that a player would probably feel, well, I don't want to fuck up the deal on the contract, etc. And the agent can probably push a club a lot harder. Whereas a club might say directly to a player, listen, if you want to stay here, you want to earn more money, you're going to go with this. Where the agent would probably come in and go, no, listen, for my client, that's not right. Lloris is getting $20,000 for a clean sheet. You can't offer him 5. Whereas the player probably doesn't have the strength to feel that. It's dependent on circumstance. And that's where an agent will come in. Agents are a dirty word in football because we just assume that we don't like the amount of money that's coming out of football clubs, essentially. And if you look further down the leagues, you obviously mentioned the amount of money that was coming out of the Premier League, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look down further and say that last season, 49 million pounds came out of championship clubs for agents' fees. That's quite scary. Wow. When these clubs can't afford, a lot of them can't afford to pot to piss.
Wait, Derby haven't paid their players for
exactly.
December right now, mate. So
exactly. It's worth saying that basically 20% of that on the agents' fees from the championship came from 2 clubs, Stoke City and Swansea City, who obviously have been in the Premier League fairly recently and have owners who are not in a financial issue, it is worth saying. But it's still an alarming amount of money. I mean, to tell you the drop-off, 3.9 million in League One was spent on agents' fees. That's a massive drop-off.
95% drop-off almost.
That's a massive drop-off from the 50 million in the Championship, which is obviously, of course, a massive drop-off from the figure you said in the Premier League earlier.
Same amount that Burnley spent.
260, basically.
Burnley spent the same amount as the entire League One.
Yes. But Burnley then he's far less on agents' fees than Stoke and Swansea.
Yeah. Interesting to think that.
Which is a little as I said, Stoke and Swansea are 2 clubs who are not in trouble from that perspective, which then tells you to golf again. of teams trying to fight for their life in the Championship and coming down from the Premier League. That's a whole different conversation in terms of parachute payments, because that's probably then helped pay for the agent fees. And I think to go further down the leagues, that's the sort of thing that needs regulated in terms of what are you spending on agents' fees. Championship clubs shouldn't be spending in excess of 5 million a season on agent fees, I don't think. That's a little bit concerning when you use the Burnley model and they're doing well and spending less on agents' fees.
Interesting. Do you know any football agents, James?
Personally, no.
I know one. And truth be told, I haven't spoken to him for about 3 years.
Is this the guy in the Cock Foster's restaurant?
No, because his career hasn't kicked off yet. But when he kicks off, he's signing me up first, mate. And you. We're going to start our own football club. I'm going to be the chairman. You're going to be the manager, and he's going to get us all the players. Don't worry about that.
Enfield
they are waiters
Town,
at his restaurant,
we're coming
but
for
don't
you.
worry about that. So I had a friend who was a football agent for a while. I haven't seen him for a while. I used to be part of this business group. We used to just meet some. There was like 12 of us in this group, and he had his own company at the time, which did something completely different. If you get empty buildings, so that you don't get squatters in these empty buildings, he used to find tenants that would live there for fuck all money. But then because there was someone living in that building, you couldn't get squatters in it. Basically, that was his business. He did really well.
So to stop squatters, he put squatters in there. That's what it sounds like.
Well, the thing is, the people would pay him rent to live in that building.
Okay.
He'd do it up. But the people that own the building wouldn't want the rent. They just don't want squatters in there. So he was cleaning up 100% of the rent for doing nothing. Grew a massive business. But before that, we get sidetracked. He was a football agent. And the interesting thing about it, and I never talked to him in massive detail because he never really did it for that long. He did it for about 6 years. Was that when I asked him about it, he really described it as a horrible working environment. He said that it was very, very ruthless, and that the people that were involved in that business side of football will stab you in the back and sell your mother. They couldn't care less. And that's ultimately why he left. He just found just not a nice environment to work in because the amount of money that was involved and the amount of there's not that many players, right? I mean, how many players are there in the Premier League with contracts? Like 500-600. So the Ruth and the majority of those are not big earners or not top level professionals. So there's not that many clients that exist in the world. So it was a very, very ruthless space. I will make an effort. Actually, I'm going to reach out to Arthur and just catch 5 minutes and find out.
Arthur. Does Arthur have a surname?
Duke. Arthur Duke.
Does Arthur Duke want to come on a podcast with us?
I don't know. I'm going to ask him. I mean, we are talking a number of years ago. But the interesting thing to take away, and I really believe it, I don't know what you think, is that the business of football is not a nice environment because it is very ruthless and the amounts of sums of money that you're talking about are very, very big. So you can see people wanting to be in there for the wrong reasons and make quick money fast.
I think we all accept that, don't they?
Yeah.
Across the board in terms of TV negotiation for football, transfers, obviously, as we've said, there are so many spin-offs to where money in football goes that is concerning. From an agent's perspective, I completely get that to start out a new career must be extremely difficult and to get clients that are worthwhile for you because you've got people like Mendes and Raiola who are just cleaning up the best talent and kind of increasing their portfolio and then delegating. Perhaps if you're an agent, you're probably best off working for Mendes rather than working for yourself.
There was an interesting interview with one agent from last year actually that's on YouTube. When they asked him how did you get into it, he basically did his qualifications in sports management, but then shadowed a couple of other agents that were willing enough to let him shadow them. And then when they had 13 and 14-year-old kids who were rejected or released by clubs, those were the ones that he would start to try and find a trial for with another club, on the hope that one of those would make it. And if one makes it, then I feel like it's a snowball that you can get many more. But you basically are sniffing around the ones that have been rejected and let go from clubs to find one that was incorrectly let go, who then gets a deal, makes it, and you build from there.
It's It's not an easy workplace. I can definitely understand that.
What's your thoughts on regulation? Because that's something we do have to talk about on this show. Because they've tried, can they do it? Can agents' fees, for example, be capped at 5% or 10% or whatever?
I don't know how yeah, but you can do that. You could say, right, well, cap an agent fee at 5% on a transfer or something. But then, all right, common transfer fee in the Premier League now probably averages, I don't know, 15 million as an average or so. But then Mina Raiola from Paul Pogba going to, let's just say, he goes back to Juventus for 80 million or something. He's going to make a shitload of money off that, isn't he? It's 4 million in his pocket or so. That's a fucking lot of
What
money,
I would
right?
say is, I get that it's very difficult to regulate it. Very difficult. Once the cat's out of the bag, it's hard to get it back in. But we've regulated financial fair play, and the way we regulated financial fair play was on a salary cap of players as a percentage of income, players' wages as a percentage of income, or what have you. I'm sure there's the possibility of having something around a percentage of agents' fees as a total of your transfer fees or outgoing income or something like that. The other thing is, you or me cannot go and manage a Premier League football club. We do a better job than a couple of people in the league, I don't doubt, but we can't. Why? Because we don't have our coaching badges. There should be something along the lines of a code of ethics or qualifications that we know that all agents are following a certain set of guidelines. Yeah, you won't stop them earning big money, but you might then just control it a little bit so that people have to do things the right way.
But then if you're the agent in the transfer of someone like Neymar, it's going to be a big deal, right? In terms of the breaking down of even like commercial rights is a big thing for players now.
They'll just find loopholes.
Exactly. So doesn't that agent therefore deserve the right to earn more money than player X who goes from Burnley to Fulham for 10 million?
So you regulate it as a percentage of or something along those lines. But I think a little bit of transparency and visibility will increase the level of trust that the average layman has in agents and what we think about them.
Jedson Fernandez was a player who went to Tottenham. We spoke about this on our Tottenham pod very recently, and he's rubbish, right? There's a loan deal.
I mean, he was linked with us for so long and ended up with you lot. And now I'm grateful.
Take him, mate. Something about that whole thing just feels murky. The whole Portuguese background again, they're going to play for Mourinho. It just feels murky. I think it's these sort of things that make you question some of the moral. And we're not saying there's an agent involvement specifically, but Portuguese player Mourinho just suddenly just gets you straight away thinking something doesn't feel right here. Tottenham have obviously taken another player on loan, Carlos Vinicius, from the same club, Benfica. I mean, Vinicius is Brazilian, but again, it's come from a Portuguese club. I think he's Brazilian. I'm sort of questioning myself now. But in any case, these sort of things make you wonder. And I think a further on conversation about this in the future is about loans. It's something we tried to challenge as a conversation in the past about I'm not comfortable with loan deals like this happening. Something doesn't feel right about it. I don't know if a lot of the time is to get round transfer fees and financial fair play and moving on. We're possibly moving on to a very different conversation here. But it's not coincidental that Tottenham have taken 2 players on loan specifically from one of the biggest clubs in Portugal rather than, I don't know, 2 random clubs in France and Holland respectively or something. Something's not right about it.
Yeah. And you've talked in the past about loans within the same league, which seem a little bit odd.
I don't like loans from Premier League club to Premier League club, like Ruben Loftus-Cheek. Sorry, that's the first name that come in my head. I just do not like loans like that between clubs in the same league.
Yep.
I think it's wrong.
Definitely topics of conversation that need to be had. I think that's a wrap, James.
Good summary, mate.
Enjoyable conversation about agents and the business side of football.
Sky tomorrow.
Yes, tomorrow. Saka, captain, scored me a goal yesterday. It's better than a kick in the nuts.
Congratulations. Thursday streaming, Friday full podcast again. We'll review all the game week, midweek action from the game week. Then look forward to obviously game week 20. Patrons, we've probably mentioned a few times on this pod. We did a Q&A yesterday, Tottenham today, talking more about Tottenham, West Ham. Tomorrow, what have we got tomorrow on Patreon? Oh, it's a patrons poll tomorrow. So we're going to be putting up for the guys some of the topics that have lost recently in the people's poll for patrons to vote on later today. Thursday's a quiz, and Friday, Sky Extra Time, on the provision that we get February TV fixtures before Friday. Otherwise, we might be recording that next week.
Yes, we might be in a position to start thinking about overhaul planning around then too.
I hope so.
We'll know a few weeks afterwards. So there we go. Thank you so much for all your support. Do jump on Twitter whenever James has tweeted the podcast and give us your thoughts on agents and anything to do with it. If you're involved in the business of football, if we've got anything wrong or right, or you agree or disagree, would love to know. But most importantly, right now, guys, do stay safe wherever you are. Ciao for now.
Thanks, everyone. Be nice to each other. Cue music, please, Mancho.